All right, I'm Salt Lake County Mayor Ben McAdams, and I have a theory that I was invited to speak on working with allies because I'm a Utah Democrat. And as Mayor Becker knows, if you're a Democrat in Utah, you either work with allies or you don't get any work done. So, prior to my election as mayor last year, I was a senator in the Utah State Legislature, where Democrats are about 19% of the legislature, so we are definitely a minority. And also worked with Mayor Becker as a senior advisor to Mayor Becker, so I have experience in city government. And I'll tell you, after working in the legislature for 5 years, I thought that was a hostile environment, but then I was elected as mayor. Let me give you some kind of the landscape of Salt Lake County. Salt Lake County it contains about 40% of the state of Utah. From our urban area, Salt Lake City, on the north end of Salt Lake County, we have 16 cities throughout the county. We have unincorporated areas that encompass about 160,000 residents, roughly. Salt Lake City is about 180,000, so we have in our unincorporated areas about 160. And then 16 other cities throughout the city for a population of about 1.1 million. And when I, this year, my first year as mayor, dug into issues like regional transportation planning, 911 and public safety integration, discussions about merging a gang task force, allocation of scarce resources throughout our 16 cities and unincorporated areas, that partisan divide felt pretty small when we're looking to bring together some regional divides and urban-rural issues and urban-suburban issues. So I have a little bit of experience working with allies and working to bridge divides and build consensus. I'm going to tell you a story. I was walking over here earlier today in this bitter cold. Reminded me of an experience I had several years ago. In fact, it was in January of 2009, before I had held elected office. I was here to attend the Obama inauguration, and remember walking to the hotel, and it was bitter cold like it is today. I guess we call it now a polar vortex, that's the word. Bitter cold, and we walked past, it was with a colleague of mine, and we walked past a store down here near Farragut Square that had a sign out front that said $5 scarves for sale. And we were freezing and thinking about going to the inauguration and standing for 5 hours, and I thought I had brought enough warm clothing, but it wasn't anywhere enough as we were so cold. So we walk into this store. We were heading back to the hotel. We walk into this store to buy a $5 scarf and start looking at the scarves, and then he shows us some ties that he has for sale that are, I don't know if they were knockoffs or what, but they were cheap ties. And I needed some ties, so they were I think they were $10 ties, but they didn't look like $10 ties. They looked like maybe $20 ties. So we started looking at the ties, and after about an hour of shopping, my colleague and I walked out with about $200 worth of ties and two $5 scarves.
And one of them?
Yeah. No, this is my regional tie, the colors that we're hoping to celebrate next Sunday. Yeah, $10 ties don't last very long. So we walked out, went back to the hotel, stashed the ties. My friend had taken a couple of pictures, and he had a local blog where he posted about. We got home, got back to Utah, and he posted about the $200 scarf and how we'd gone in and ended up spending $200 on this $5 scarf, and he posted that on his blog. So the next year I was back in town with Mayor Becker and was walking past this same shop, and all of the $10 ties that I'd purchased were all worn out and I had to get rid of them. So I saw this store again, and I thought, great, I can go in and buy a few more $10 ties and have some ties to last throughout the year. So I walk into the store, and right as I walked in, the shop owner looks up and he says, "Ben, it is so great to see you again." And I kind of a little bit unnerved, looked around, wondering how he knows my name. And, I can't be the only person who spent $100 on ties in his shop. And so I started looking at ties. He was helping me, very eager to help me again. And as we're looking at some ties, I look up and I see my picture blown up on the wall, the poster size of his blog post on the wall. And it was a little disconcerting. And then I looked at the door, and on the glass coming into the store was my picture. Then we went to pay. I went to Boston Ties. I went to pay, and I looked there. Laminated next to the cash register was my picture. Anyway, so building, working with allies. First of all, what I don't put in my bio, that is, in addition to being the mayor of Salt Lake County and a former Utah State Senator, I also am a clothing model. So got that going for me. Working with allies. I think this experience that I had is a lot like working with allies, where what our job as a Democrat in Utah or a mayor, a community activist, other leader is, the first step is to have that $5 scarf that we can get somebody in the door. And if we can get them in the door and look at what we're selling, get them to pause long enough to hear the ideas of what we're talking about, and maybe buy a tie or two. And then before too long, they're the poster child of the idea that we're working on. So let me tell you quickly, I've got about 5 minutes left, about one of those $10 ties that we're selling in Utah. And that is working with Karen here from Voices for Utah Children, the United Way of Salt Lake, and one of our school districts on a preschool project. So we heard earlier this afternoon about the merits of early education, how early education is a game changer for our at-risk youth. And you know the studies that say if a child can get early education, it changes the course of that child's life. But in our case, in our study, shows that we eliminate the opportunity gap between our at-risk kids and our kids who have started on an equal playing field. That we see them reading at grade level. These are kids who would otherwise be starting kindergarten without knowing their numbers and shapes and colors and vocabulary to compete with their peers, and they're falling behind. In fact, what we see is that many of these kids who start preschool behind will end up by the 3rd grade in special ed. And we have special ed programs that exist for very worthwhile reasons, kids who have learning disabilities, kids who have special education needs. But we also find that a lot of our special ed kids are kids who don't have learning disabilities, but simply have a parent who worked 3 jobs when they were young and didn't read to them, didn't talk to them, they didn't learn their numbers and their colors. And what we find is that if we can spend a little bit of money getting these kids into a preschool program, and we've done this because Voices for Utah Children has followed a cohort now for 5 years of kids where they got a high-quality preschool program. And these are kids based on the PPVT, the Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test that we administer, that we know with near certainty that at age 3 and 4, if they score below a certain point on the PPVT, they are guaranteed to end up in our state-funded special ed program. So we ask ourselves, why are we going to put these kids through special ed when they need it in 3rd grade, but we can easily change the course of their destiny by investing early. So it lent itself to what's commonly known as a social impact bond, where as mayors, those of you who are mayors are familiar with this in the context of a redevelopment, where we tap into future potential to fund the game changer today, whether it's cleaning up a brownfield. But we saw it in this case of early education, where if we can tap into future cost savings in special education and use that future cost savings to fund preschool today, we can change the odds for the kids in our community and also save money in special ed. And incidentally, if we save money in special ed, we're also going to save money in juvenile justice and crime prevention. We're going to see kids graduate from high school. We're going to see them not joining gangs.
Don't hit the space button.
Not yet. Change the future for kids in our community. So that's the goal of what we were working on in Utah. Voices for Utah Children pioneered it together with the United Way of Salt Lake. They took it to the legislature. We in Salt Lake County, I don't fund the school system. I don't have control over the school system. It's a state endeavor. And we took it to the legislature, and the legislature last year, about a year ago, declined to participate. I thought it was a no-brainer, risk-free investment of the taxpayer because of the way we had it structured. Either these kids didn't end up in special ed, and if they did end up in special ed, we weren't going to pay. We had an arrangement set up with private financial investors who would pay on a pay-for-success model. Our legislature declined to participate last year, largely because we had some of the social conservatives come out and say, we're taking kids from their mother's lap and putting them into a government program, and why would we want to do that? And I know these kids because they live in my community. They're not on mother's lap. Mother is struggling to put food on the table, struggling to provide for the kids, but they're not at home, they're not getting that quality time with the parent. That's why they're starting in kindergarten. And this is a game changer for those kids. So when the legislature declined to participate, Salt Lake County stepped in. Now we won't see cost savings in special ed, but we will see cost savings down the road. So we stepped in together with private charities and donors in Utah to step forward to prime the pump, we say, to get this program going, to prove the concept that this program could work. We're now 6 months into the program started in September, so 4 months into the program where we have 600 kids in our community who are participating in preschool. Through this, I met a woman, her name was Jen Mafua, who wanted to put her daughter into preschool, could not afford the tuition. And now, thanks to this program, her daughter is in preschool. Jen is volunteering in the classroom, and we know, because we've read the studies, what this means for Jen and her family and her daughter. What we're doing now, we're going back to the legislature this year, having a proof of concept. We found that while there were some social conservatives who were fundamentally opposed to the program, we also found some no votes who didn't understand the financing model, were confused by the financing model. Some who weren't really confident that private sector's donors would step up to facilitate this program. And we now have a partnership with Goldman Sachs and J.B. Pritzker, who are funding this with a payback by Salt Lake County and donors from the United Way of Salt Lake to fund this. So we have a proof of concept, we've shown and demonstrated it can work, and we have faces and names like Jen and her daughter who we can show are being impacted by this. We have a sponsor this year, who Representative Greg Hughes. He was formerly the Republican representative, chair of the Republican Conservative Caucus in the state legislature, who is now the poster child who we're putting his face on the door and next to the cash register as the person who is marketing and selling this program. Because when I took it to my county council, we have 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats on the Salt Lake County Council. We took it to the county council, and I had the Democrats saying, "This is so great, we have to fund this because it will change these kids' lives." And I had a Republican then, after our Democrats spoke, the Republican said, "We have to fund this because we will shrink government by doing this." And we found common ground. And we're finding common ground with the Utah legislature as well, because we will change lives for children in our community, and we will shrink government in the process. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to join you today. I'm Karen Crompton, President of Voices for Utah Children, a nonprofit, nonpartisan, multi-issue child advocacy group. And I have to say, listening to the earlier panel today, I thought I was at a child advocacy conference, and I was thrilled. You know, kids need all the voices they can get speaking for them, and sometimes we think politicians just want a photo op with the kids, but when it's time to walk the walk, not much walking happens sometimes. So it's really exciting to hear about what's happening in cities across this country, and I think we maybe underutilize this resource. So I have things to think about here. I'm really fortunate that I have 2 mayors that represent me, the county mayor and also Salt Lake City Mayor Ralph Becker. This project that Ben just talked about, I think, has been one of the most exciting, rewarding, complicated, frustrating things we've ever done at our organization. And for some of you may have seen stories about it. It did make the New York Times and others. It seems like things happened really fast in Utah. This is the second results-based financing project underway in the United States, the first one being at Rikers Island around recidivism. So we are really pioneering something out there. And people would say, Utah, pioneering, scratch their head, how did this happen? It started back in 2009 when there was a lot of talk about how do we close the achievement gap. And we received a small grant from American Express at the time with the focus on looking at early childhood. We believe, there's certainly the national data that shows it. Dr. James Heckman, Nobel economist, has done a lot of longitudinal work. But all of you know, back in your cities and states, policymakers want something that they can see in their own backyard. Well, Utah does not fund preschool. We have Title I preschool programs and private preschool programs. So we looked around and we did find a high-quality program within our state in the Granite School District, which is one of our largest school districts. And as we met with them, we were able to confirm it's high quality, which is important if you're going to get the kind of results we want. 2, they collected data, and 3, they were willing to share it. And when we looked at that data, we were just blown away by what we saw. As Ben said, we've tracked 5 cohorts of kids now, but we started looking at 3- and 4-year-olds who in preschool were testing so low that you would have thought they're on a track for special ed. And so while our focus initially was on the achievement gap, it became very clear that there was a real opportunity for significant cost avoidance for remediation costs. We've collected data now for the 5 cohorts of kids. Goldman Sachs, who was a board member of United Way. By the way, Goldman Sachs is not just a New York corporation, they're the second largest location in their world is Utah, Salt Lake City, Utah. So they became aware of this project and we started having discussions about where we might go with this. We also found a legislator who was a real champion and a believer. I mean, this is a time when data really made a difference in policymakers' mind, when you could show them the change in test scores and the change in outcomes for kids. And so last year, there was a bill in the state legislature that was a targeted bill for at-risk kids, particularly those in very low-income situations. It did use a results-based financing mechanism, and it failed, which was disappointing to all of us. But we didn't stay disappointed too long. We sat down and said, okay, how do we move forward with this and keep the momentum going, show that there is still interest on the part of investors? How do we demonstrate that this project can really work? So we had to think about the scale of the project. It had to be big enough that a Goldman Sachs would be willing to put some money into it. But we didn't want to make it so big that the state could say, well, you know, Goldman Sachs and philanthropic community, you go take care of it. So that became the challenge. As we met with United Way and Goldman Sachs and J.B. Pritzker in May, they were wondering, could we put an agreement together in a month? And we all kind of took a big deep breath and Goldman said, well, we'll work on it. So then our challenge was not only finding, you know, that the investor would come in and do that, but who's going to repay it? I mean, we're a small nonprofit organization. We cannot be the repayment source. So much to their credit, United Way, their board was incredibly visionary in this, and Salt Lake County all stepped up to say, we will be the repayment source on this loan. So we're back this year with a preschool bill, very similar to last year's, and you know, we're feeling pretty good about its chances, so we'll see. But what I want to share with you now, you've heard a lot of talking today and you've seen PowerPoints and it's late in the day and we're between you and dinner now, I know. So I thought I wanted to show you a short 3-minute video we did that I think really tells the story of what we do, why we do it, and who we do it for. These are kids who were in the Granite Preschool program considered very highly at risk.
Basketball player and baseball player. I want to be an English teacher when I grow up. I want to teach people that come from other countries around the world to be English, because right now I'm learning English because I'm teaching my grandma and grandpa when they come over. I brought my social studies paper and I got a 90 on it. This is for multiplying decimal. I finished around 5 minutes after I started. I got 4th grade now. I got a best student award on Monday, and then I got 100 what? I got 100% on my writing test. I got 100%, and I didn't think you need any help for it. I brought all my writings that I did this year sometimes. And then on the back, if we didn't know what we were doing this video, just said guess. So I did, but I only got one wrong here.
These incredible kids that you just met all came to us extremely at risk. Their test scores entering into preschool were all very low. They looked like kids who we may have seen as potentially eligible for special education. As you can hear and see, these kids are not children with disabilities. They were children who had lacked opportunity.
Are thinking about going to college?
Once we gave them that opportunity, things just blossom and grow, and you get these incredible kids who are talking about college degrees and master's degrees and PhDs, and they know what those things are, and school works, and these kids are on fire. They've caught that bug. They want to go to school, and it started in preschool.
We made that video because we've got lots of data and we've got lots of statistics and we can show what their test scores are, but you also need to put a face on it. And we work a lot with data, and we're a data-driven advocacy organization, but it's exciting to see this. These kids are in 6th grade now. One of those little boys is class president this year at his school. They have closed the achievement gap. They are testing in math and English at the same level as kids statewide. Within their own school, which is a high poverty school, they're 20 points higher than their counterparts. We know it works. You hear about fade out sometimes. It has not faded out, it is stuck. And it's because we can have this kind of data that an investor is willing to come in and make that upfront investment. If you don't have the data, you're not going to find anybody who's willing to gamble with their money. So, like I said, it's been an exciting project. Working with the investment banks has been challenging, to say the least. Fortunately, we had someone on our staff who is a former investment backer and understands cash flows, and it was part of the negotiation of how the deal was established. But we are very excited. I will say social impact bonds or financing, we do not, it is technically not a bond in this case, isn't a solution for every problem in a state or a city or in government. But for places where you can show a cost savings because of an intervention, it has potential. But again, you'll need the data. So stay tuned. We're looking for great things this year. Thank you.